So I had a subscriber that requested that I do this video. It was about the differences between a sponsor and a therapist. I've seen this list before. I think I addressed it in another video, if I'm not mistaken. I tried to look it up, but I was a little bit pressed for time this week with a whole lot of things, and I just decided to do another one. If I have addressed it in the past, because I think I can cover more ground with this and hopefully not lose my temper at the sheer stupidity of it. But I think it's really funny whoever wrote this list as though a therapist and a sponsor it's another one of these false dichotomies where it's like this or it's like that. Plus, they're making a sweeping generalization about the role of therapy and different types of therapy and what therapists do. They're probably basing the list off of pop culture, TV psychology kind of thing, and have no idea what real therapy entails or how many different types of therapy there is. In fact, I'm going to type in one little thing here just to add to it because it's on the list. Anyway, I had to do that real quickly. But I actually pulled up psychology today before I started making this video, and I didn't realize just how many different fields of therapy there are. There's everything from something called integrative therapy to accelerated experiential dynamic psychotherapy, neuro-linguistic programming therapy, dialectical behavior therapy, cognitive behavioral therapy, cognitive stimulation therapy, trauma-focused cognitive behavioral therapy, humanistic therapy, gestalt therapy, and I'm not even going to read the entire list. It goes on and on and on about how many different types of therapy and approaches there are. So whoever wrote this obviously doesn't know anything about therapy, but of course, it's one of those things I've seen AA people do before in the past. They'll say something in a sweeping generalization or in a very judgmental attitude, and as long as everybody's agreeing with them about it, they're more than happy to take the praise for it. But the moment someone calls them out for the bullshit that it obviously is, they'll say something like, well, I wasn't really speaking in specifics. I really didn't. In other words, you really didn't mean what you say because now you've been exposed for being full of shit like you really are. But I'm going to read the list through and I'm going to do my take on it here in a minute. Well, not in a minute. I'm going to do it right now. Well, I said in a minute. The difference between your sponsor and a therapist, and of course at the bottom is all these people, oh, it's so true. It's just so true. Yeah, of course, like cult members, you don't know how to think for yourself. And another thing I would like to also add one other thing I would like to clarify with this is that if you notice, AA members have a double-sided language in their big book to pull out for these kinds of situations. Like if you were to call this person who wrote this shit out, they would have well, I didn't really mean that literally because the big book itself says we only know a little. Yeah, you only know a little, but in little tidbits of information like this, or at times when you see them bashing religion, even though I'm not religious at all, they're also telling you they're better than all the religions. They know more than all the therapists. In other words, well, the big book says we only know a little bit. And, it even says you can go to a doctor. But then you see shit statements like this online. And it's very obvious AA people think they're smarter than all the therapists. They're better than all the therapists. And they know more. And they tell people, in instances, not to take their psychiatric medication and things of that nature. But rather than go off on a tangent, I'll just start with, they listed 12 reasons. I guess because there's 12 steps, they felt the desire to write 12 reasons, But number one, your sponsor isn't all that interested in the reasons, they put it in quotation marks like it's triviality, that you used or drank. Your sponsor isn't all that interested in the reasons you used. Well, that's probably because a sponsor is not qualified to even understand the reasons you used. A sponsor doesn't care about the reasons you use because the only thing they're interested in is talking about themselves, is breaking you down so you'll accept the cult religion. And no, they're not interested in you at all. After all, if you drink again and die, they'll just say, well, by the grace of God, some have to die so that others can live. Well, they just wasn't ready. They didn't really want it bad enough. Of course they're not interested in the reasons that you drank. They're not interested in that because They're not interested in actually helping you. The only thing they're interested in doing is converting you to the fucking cult religion. By the way, another reason they're not interested in the reasons that you use to drink is because they have no qualifications, they have no training, they have been reading the same book over and over again since has not been updated or revised or anything else since 1935, and they're not smart enough to understand the reasons why you may have drank. They don't see the complexities of addiction. They're not involved in the 21st century where we know there's a multitude, a variety of reasons why people abuse drugs, and it has everything to do not just with genetics, from socioeconomic factors to childhood abuse to trauma to everything else. Of course, they're not interested in those things because they're not qualified to talk about it. I mean, do you really think that's an own to say something like that? Let me go to the next one. Your therapist thinks your root problem is your lack of self-esteem, negative self-image, and your poor self-concept. Your sponsor thinks that your problem is a 3-letter word with no hyphens. Ooh, sponsor's so smart. The only thing he can say is God. In other words, he isn't qualified to understand anything about what motivates people. He's not qualified to understand that those things are very real things that exist, like a therapist who is trained to understand those things, like a therapist who has gone to school to read about those things, like all the different things a therapist has to do in order to get a license to practice, unlike a sponsor who is beholden to no one, who has no license to practice, who is given no qualifications, who doesn't have to meet any standards or requirements. All they got to do is read that book and go to a lot of meetings and regurgitate cult garbage. And of course they're not interested in you at all. A therapist might actually be interested in getting to the root causes and conditions of your problem. The sponsor right here says your sponsor thinks your problem is a 3-letter word with no hyphens. That's probably because most sponsors aren't intelligent enough to say anything beyond a 3-letter word, unless they're talking about themselves. You know, if you go to a sponsor and you say, I had serious trauma growing up, oh, that ain't nothing. I don't even need to hear the rest of the story. Let me tell you what happened. Well, when I was 7 years old, I was already robbing banks and drinking Listerine in my mother's bathroom. I was already being kicked out on the streets while my father used to break my arms and make me walk 15 miles to school. That's what you get when you talk to a sponsor. A sponsor is incapable of listening. Okay. Since I'm going to add this before some AA cult member jumps in here and says, you're making generalizations. You're talking in generalizations. You're not going into all the that ain't how this works. You see, if you assholes are going to make sweeping generalizations, then I'm going to make sweeping generalizations. See how that works? It's really funny sometimes when you're making a sweeping generalization about AA, they want to talk about nuances. They want to talk about you can't, make a judgment against everyone, but they love to go around making judgments of everyone. Now, I could go into great detail about nuances in terms of not every sponsor is a piece of shit garbage, although I'm going to go out on a limb and say probably 98% of them are, that I encountered in over my decade or so in the cult religion. But if they're going to make sweeping generalizations, then turnabout is just simply fair fucking play, isn't it? Especially for the purposes of this video. Next. Your therapist wants to pamper your inner child. Your sponsor thinks it ought to be spanked. Is that an own? Yeah, your sponsor's a bullying, hateful, sadistic old son of a bitch that's never accomplished nothing in his life, that doesn't have any qualifications to know about all the motivating factors in human existence, and understands nothing about science, nothing about medicine, nothing about therapy. He's been reading one old book written by a phony con artist in the 1930s that hasn't been updated or revised, and so yeah, he's real qualified to tell you, you need to be spanked. And by the way, all therapy doesn't deal with your inner child. All therapy doesn't tell you to spoil your inner child. So you painted a picture, you basically painted a parody of what a therapist is, and attacked that by saying, yeah, I'm a hateful old abusive asshole that likes to beat vulnerable people down. That's what makes me more qualified. And I don't even have to talk to you about anything other than a 3-letter word with no hyphens. God. Yeah, I really want to trust a fucking lowlife like you. Number 4, your sponsor thinks your inventory should be about you, not your parents. Again, you're making a sweeping generalization. All therapy is not talking about your parents, so obviously you know nothing about therapy. You ripped it off from what you saw on television, And by the way, the inventory is not about you, because if you're going to actually do an inventory about yourself, you get to list your good qualities. You get to list your accomplishments. You get to list things about you that feel good. Your sponsor just wants to beat you down and crush you, spank your inner child, say the word God, and make you swallow cult religion. The inventory is not about you. The inventory is about demeaning you, breaking you, so you'll become a true dedicated cult member. That's all the fucking inventory is about. They're acting like there's some kind of fucking Marine sergeant in some war movie somewhere putting people through boot camp. You're not a Marine sergeant, and you're not training people to go to war. You're dealing with vulnerable people, and you're high off of bullying them. That's what you're admitting to with this stupid fucking list. Number 5. Speaking of your parents, your sponsor tells you not to confront them, but to make amends to them. You fucking condescending asshole. First of all, therapy, not all therapy tells you to confront your parents. Second of all, did it ever occur to you in your narrow-minded, ignorant worldview that's still trapped in the 1930s that there are people out there who have been abused by their parents, there are narcissists that have parents, there are serial killers that are parents, there are people who have murdered their children, there are people who have done horrible things to their children, but because those parents do those horrible things to those kids, the sponsor's attitude is, well, you need to understand they did the best they could. Let's make excuses for them, and you have to go say you're sorry that you got raped by your father. Yeah, you're very, very vastly superior to therapy. You're admitting you're an ignorant, stupid fuck that's got no qualifications to be treating people with addiction problems, and you think that this list is some kind of own. Number 6, the only time your sponsor uses the word closure is before the word mouth. Ooh, I just love this phony fucking tough guy shit. Yeah, of course you can't, how are you supposed to help someone if they can't talk? If the only time that you go into a sponsor is so they can tell you to shut up, tell you to accept God, apologize to your parents without knowing anything about you, without knowing any details about you, without knowing anything about anything other than a book from the 1930s that did not actually help anybody, that actually worked so well that they had to buddy up with the government to get people court-ordered into their stupid fucking program, that actually has got a multi-billion-dollar-a-year racket in the treatment center industry because it works so well, and you think that you're qualified to say, shut up, get God. Fuck you. If somebody read this to me, there ain't no way I'd tolerate it, Number 7, your sponsor thinks boundaries are things you need to take down, not build up. Well, of course they don't want you to have any healthy boundaries in AA. That way they can trick you into constantly living in AA meetings in the name of service work, in the name of doing whatever they tell you whenever they want something done. They don't want you to have any boundaries. They don't want you to have any self-respect. They don't want you to have any validation as a human being. They want to bully you. I mean, this entire list up to this point is about bullying you, telling you God, because it's a 3-letter word with no hyphens, not giving a fuck about you, just telling you, you need to accept everything, make amends to your fucking parents, and we don't care about you as a person, we care about you accepting our cult religion. That's all this shit is. Of course healthy people need boundaries, but what do sponsors know about being healthy? Oh, that's right. They don't have any training. They don't have any credentials to their name. They don't have anything but a fucking book from the 1930s, written by a con artist, that has a 5% success rate overall, which I think is a gross exaggeration. A program with a 95% failure rate that was written in the 1930s by a con artist who was a member of a Nazi-worshipping cult is qualified more than a therapist who is adapted to the 21st century, changed with the modern times, and actually understands how science works. Oh, but that's right, they don't like the word science, they don't like the word intellectual, they don't like any of those words because it implies that they're a bunch of stupid motherfuckers high off of their own self-importance, bullying people around. They actually think this list is an own? Number 8, your therapist wants you to love yourself first. Your sponsor wants you to love others first. That is the biggest pile of shit I have ever read. And by the way, you should love yourself above any fucking weird, creepy old assholes in AA that think that you need to bow and be servile to them. And by the way, I've never had a sponsor that told me that. I've never had a sponsor that told me you need to love others before you even care about yourself at all, which, by the way, is probably one of the most unhealthy fucking things I have ever heard. For one thing, the only sponsors I ever had, the only thing they wanted you to do was suck off the program and bow and scrape to all the old-timer elite in the hopes of becoming a mean, bullying asshole like them. Your therapist wants you to love yourself first. That's because your therapist is trained. That's because your therapist has years of study behind them. That's because your therapist has a professional license. What you got as a sponsor? Oh, that's right. 20 years sitting around in meetings, telling old stories and drunkalogs. Yeah, I'm really confident in your abilities to help people, since this entire list so far admits that you're nothing but a bullying fucking asshole that's not interested in science, that's not interested in medicine, that's not interested in the modern world, that's not interested in anything more than 1930s good old Calvinistic cult Protestant hardline bullshit. And it's more twisted than even it's more twisted than that even. I was going to add something else, but I would have gone off there. Your therapist prescribes caretaking and medication. Your sponsor prescribes prayer making and meditation. Yeah, except the only problem is medication and caretaking and those kinds of things. We actually have measurable scientific results as to why that works. We actually have years of study behind us, with great longitude, that shows us why that's a necessary method. These methods are often changed. They're often updated. Did you know when they first mapped out the human genome in like 2000, 2001, they said that they thought they had figured it out, that everybody's DNA was basically a blueprint for how they were going to live their lives and how they were going to behave and everything else. And here we are, 24 years later, and they're saying, nope, that's actually not correct. As a matter of fact, after years of studying this thing and after years of new information and years of other things that have happened, we now can know that that's not actually the case. In fact, we've been questioning that for a very long time. Did you know that the prevalent attitude, generally speaking, among science is the idea, my theory needs to be proven wrong? Believe it or not, like Bill W. talks about evolutionists at one point. Evolutionists are constantly trying to be proven wrong. They're always, forever, when you look at the news, finding new discoveries or new things or unearthing old archaeological evidence that challenges everything that the established opinions and theories are. It revamps, it updates. What do these fucking assholes in AA do? Oh, that's right. They read one book from the 1930s, a book full of religious assertions. They don't know anything, they don't understand anything, and they want to prescribe prayer and meditation, which, by the way, is not proven to do one fucking thing for anybody. You think all those people that were just trapped in a 7.8 earthquake in Japan, who needed medical assistance or who needed supplies or who were trapped under rubble, you think they needed medication and first aid assistance, or do you think they needed to just pray about it, look at their part in it, and figure out why God wanted them to be down there? This is such a pile of shit. Luckily, we only got 3 more to go. Your sponsor thinks anger management skills are numbered 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. Okay. In other words, by the way, all therapy is not anger management, but also that must explain why the old timers are such an angry, miserable, hateful bunch of bastards that I saw in all my time there. Because steps 1 through 12 work so well. They work so well that AA has a 5% success rate at most. In fact, the weather's up and down, so my sinuses again. I say that in a lot of videos, but the time of year. Steps 1 through 12 have a massive failure rate. The turnover rate in AA is unusually high. George Valiant, who was an AA defender, tried to study AA for decades to prove that AA worked, and when he found that AA results were horrifying, he did an about face and just said, well, I still think it's a good program because it helps people find God. Let me ask you a question. If you were needing help with something and you went to a group of professionals and you said, I need help with this particular problem, and they said, well, 95% of the people who come to us failed because they didn't want it bad enough, but the tiny, tiny little percentage of people who succeed, it's because they find God. Would you take any of that seriously? Would you even be in the room with those kinds of people? Wouldn't you say, you guys are a bunch of phony fucking quacks and I need to go somewhere else? And this one's another one that pisses me off. Number 11. Now that you haven't used in 6 months, your therapist thinks that you should start making lists of goals and objectives for the next 5 years. Well, yeah, I think that's common sense. I think that's rational. I think that's reasonable. Starting with finishing up that college degree. Yeah, nothing wrong with that. Your sponsor thinks you should start today by cleaning coffee pots, helping him carry a heavy box of literature to the jail, and making your bed. Making your bed? Who the fuck are you? You're that whack job Jordan Peterson. If you want to make your bed, you can turn the wall. First of all, you're not supposed to live the rest of your life as a fucking slave to your fucking sponsor. Of course, when you haven't used in 6 or 7 months, you should start looking at other life goals. Of course, after 6 or 7 months, you should put addiction in the rearview mirror where it belongs, and you should move on with your life. But no, not your sponsor. Your sponsor wants you to be a slave, make coffee, clean the cigarette butts outside, take literature to the jail, so I can make more, so I can go down there in jail and talk about what a wonderful person I am. Make your bed, says the fucking old-timer who sits in 4 or 5 meetings a day, who never has a steady fucking job, who's always sucking off government paychecks and stealing from his sponsees. Yeah, you're real qualified to tell me what to do with my life after 6 months away without a drink. Again, fuck you. Oh, I love this last one more than anything. Your sponsor won't lose their license to practice if they talk about God. Lose their license. Your sponsor won't lose their license to practice if they talk about God. You don't have a license. That's right. You can't lose a license because you don't have one. You've never been qualified for one. You've never been trained to have one. All you've got is, I'm going to repeat it again, for those who haven't heard me all the way in the back of the theater there. You don't have any professional license. You don't have any fucking qualifications. All you got is a book from the 1930s. Written by a fucking con artist. You think that this list is an own? You think this list actually proves that you're superior to therapy? So let me get this straight. I'm going to sum the entire list up. From start to finish, it's all about your sponsor wants to break your spirit. Your sponsor wants to break your belief in yourself. Your sponsor doesn't want you to love yourself. Your sponsor doesn't want you to take care of yourself. Your sponsor wants you to be an obedient, servile slave to the religious cult. And you think that this is some kind of own. You think this is a healthy list. You think that this fucking list actually makes it sound like you're more qualified than to deal with a therapist. And you got the people here on this message board. Oh, I'm so glad you shared this excellent comparison. I'm glad today because I don't have to go to a therapist to give me an impression they really care. Sponsors care, yeah. You want me to tell you all the horror stories I know about sponsors over the years? I can tell you a bunch and we could still be here talking at midnight. You want me to tell you all the AA horror stories I've heard from other members over the years because we'd still be here a week from now? I think I pretty much summed up the entire situation at hand right here with in this list. This list actually is a great list because it tells you why the therapist is qualified and the sponsor is just an overinflated gas bag, high on the sound of his own motherfucking voice, and isn't qualified to tell you anything. These kind of things make me really angry, in case you haven't noticed. I've kind of calmed down a little bit now after I ranted and raved over that. But have you ever read anything more condescending, more arrogant, more snobby than to say, you know something, I don't have any qualifications, I have no professional licenses, I have nothing but one book I've read in my entire life over the past 25 years of sitting in meetings 3 or 4 times a day. But you know what? I'm way more qualified than trained professionals who are answerable to a board of psychologists, who are answerable to, a psychologist can't spread your personal information around without serious repercussions. A psychologist can't sleep with your wife without serious repercussions. Sponsors can. Sponsors can do those kinds of things. A professional therapist can't steal out of your wallet without serious repercussions, loss of license, possible jail time. But sponsors can. They can do it and not face any consequences at all, because the AA group will tell you that the traditions matter more than anything, and that you have to be quiet and be servile, and after all, the sponsor has more sober time than you. A therapist cannot repeat the secrets you talk to them about to your best friends and your family. Sponsors can. A therapist, if you die drunk, is not going to say it's by the grace of God that you died drunk, and that they didn't die drunk. Sponsors do. Really start comparing the list here for a minute. if you went to a therapist and you didn't like what the therapist is saying, because I'm certainly not going to make a logical argument from authority here and say that a therapist is always 100% right. I'm not going to make an argument from education here. A therapist has been to school a long time, therefore they're always right. But I am going to say this: if you don't like a therapist, you can get another one. A therapist doesn't tell you got to call me at 7 o'clock in the afternoon. If you call me at 7:01, I'm going to hang up. A therapist is not going to tell you most of my patients drink and die because they're unwilling to be honest. A therapist can be held accountable for malpractice. A therapist can be sued. A therapist can be challenged. You can go to another therapist. You can't do any of those things with a sponsor. The sponsor is not bound by a code of ethics. A sponsor is not bound by any kind of oath or anything they take to treat people. Sponsors can do whatever the fuck they want. You can have a serial killer for a sponsor. And you know what would happen if he was a serial killer and he got caught and you were freaked out about it? The AA people would say, well, he's probably been sober 25 years. Think about these things for a little bit. Think about them and take all the time you need. I think I pretty much summed it all up. I think it's just hilarious that these people brag about being ignorant, narrow-minded, uneducated, fucking moron bullies, and they think somehow that this is somehow a testimony to how great they all are. Anyway, I talked 26 minutes on this list. I hope the person who requested it, I hope I covered the ground they wanted, because they said that list pissed them off, and I understand why. I was getting pretty angry myself when I was going through it. Until next time.